Washington, and we'll be telling you about that a little bit later, but first some politics. Jeb Bush knew he was stirring up potential backlash over the weekend when he said many immigrants come to America illegally as an act of love for their family. Here's what the former governor said, plus a response now from Senator Ted Cruz of Texas.
I'm going to say this and it'll be on tape, and so be it. The way I look at this is someone who comes to our country because they couldn't come legally. They come to our country because their families, you know, a dad who loved their children was worried that their children didn't have food on the table. And they, you know, wanted to make sure their family was intact. And they crossed the border because they had no other means to work to be able to provide for their family. Yes, they broke the law, but it's not a felony. It's kind of it's an act of love.
There's no doubt that immigrants come to this country because they're seeking a better world, they're seeking the American dream, and they're seeking a better life for their kids. And all of that is positive and beneficial. What isn't positive and beneficial is breaking the law to do so. And
he said it's not a felony.
Well, look, in my view, we need to be a nation that welcomes and celebrates legal immigrants.
Senator Cruz was also asked about 2016, whether an establishment candidate would be good for the party.
You know, I do think there are folks in Washington who want to pick the party's nominee, and they inevitably want to pick a nominee who they think won't rock the boat. And in my view, from the perspective of a Republican who believes we need to win and we need to win because the country's on the wrong path because we're facing enormous fiscal and economic challenges, I think the only way Republicans win is to have a candidate who runs as a strong conservative with a positive, hopeful, optimistic message. That's the path to victory. And I don't think Washington elites are going to be very effective picking the nominee. I think it's going to be quite rightly a decision for the grassroots to make.
Is Jeb Bush a strong conservative, you think?
You know, look, that's a question for the voters to say.
All right, so Willie Geist, at the dinner table with my dad last night, we were talking about the Republican candidates. Jeb Bush was one of two names that came up, and I think maybe some other Republicans are a little nervous at this point.
What is the big thing? Who does he like? Does he like Jeb Bush?
Why don't you guys ask him next time he comes on? You might be surprised.
You know who we can also ask? Ben Smith, who appears to have mixed feelings about this because there's a subtly titled piece he's written for BuzzFeed.
It's very subtle, Will. I'm trying to read through the lines here.
Why Jeb Bush is a terrible candidate.
What?
Quote, the notion that Jeb Bush is going to be the Republican presidential nominee, Ben writes, is a fantasy nourished by the people who used to run the Republican Party. Bush has been out of a game that changed radically during the 12 years since he last ran for office. He missed the transformation of his brother from Republican savior to squish, the rise of the Tea Party, the molding of his peer Mitt Romney into a movement conservative, and the ascendancy of a new generation of politicians, Marco Rubio, Paul Ryan, Scott Walker, Ted Cruz among them, who've been fully trained, shaped in that new dynamic. Those men occasionally, carefully, respectfully break with the movement. Scorning today's Republican Party is, by contrast, the core of Jeb's political identity.
So I'm going to get the Ouija board out tonight and try to get the letters and try to figure out exactly what he thinks.
Tough to read through the lines. Why do you think he's, I mean, do you think there's nothing redeeming about him going forward?
I mean, this isn't about redemption, but I think that I think that there's a school of Republicanism, sort of the John Huntsman school, maybe the Joe Scarborough school, that is about telling today's Republican Party that they need to change. I mean, the best case for Jeb is that he's Mitt Romney, that he's a technocratic, well-regarded governor, but Mitt Romney came crawling to the base on his belly for like 3 years, you know, pledging his fealty to them, where John Huntsman ran to tell them, you know, tell them to change their ways. And that's how Romney got the nomination. Jeb does not seem inclined to do that.
Yeah, I would, you know, I'm a big fan of Ben's. I think he's got this one pretty much totally wrong. I think you look at the Republican Party, and who do they nominate? They nominate the guy who's going to be the establishment candidate, the guy who's got the money backing. They nominated Dole, they nominated Bush, they nominated McCain, they nominated Romney. I don't think Romney crawled. I mean, he did say I'm a severe conservative. He did have to move on some issues. Will Jeb Bush have problems on immigration? Of course he will. Will he be able to give a series of speeches where he lays out the case that going forward in the future, the Republican Party has got to evolve on immigration if it wants to be a presidential party, if it wants to win the White House? I think he can do that. Can he talk about education, Common Core standards, which will also be a way that people beat up on him, this idea there's a national education program? I think he can do that too and say, if we want to compete in the 21st century, we got to do it with schools that work and kids that learn. I think he can do all that, and he's not Mitt Romney. He's a better politician. He dominated in Florida. He's been out of the game 12 years. I would say the question is not whether Jeb Bush can win or not. I think he can win. The question is whether he's going to run. Nobody knows. 50-50.
Well, Ben spends a lot of time on Wall Street, and this is, I don't think I've ever really seen like a bigger gap between
what. This is like you went after him.
No, they're going at it.
Exactly. I like it.
We used to work together. I can be a little ad hominem. But truly, I don't think Chuck can speak to this, but I don't think I've ever seen a bigger gap between what Republican donors, what the Republican elite thinks, and they would just love Bush to run. They deeply respect, and the issues that he's really committed to, open borders and Common Core education reform, are things that the Republican elite is really devoted to, even though the base doesn't like them much. Meanwhile, I don't think I've ever seen a bigger divide between what the donor class is, what the base is into.
My question is who, if you get Jeb Bush in a primary, I'm sorry, I'll let you go, Chuck, but who beats him? Does Rand Paul beat him? Does Ted Cruz beat him? I could see a conservative grassroots candidate taking out a guy like Jeb Bush. But who's it going to be?
Jeb Bush beats himself. That's the only way he does it. I want to bring up something, Chuck, to you, something that Ben said about John Huntsman. Huntsman was a great governor when he was in Utah. Jeb was a great governor in Florida. I think Jeb's one of the best politicians I've ever campaigned around or ever seen campaign, so I wouldn't put anybody in Jeb's category. That said, they do share one thing in common, and you brought my name up, and this is where I separate from those two. There's sort of this hand-wringing, sort of this shoulder shrugging, sort of a, my Republican Party, what has happened to it? And if they'll come to me, I will be there. No, hell no. The only reason I bring this up is because I go in, fist swinging and go around and say, no, this is our party, da-da-da. There is sort of this Huntsmanian, this Huntsman feel to him that is sort of a shoulder shrug going, I don't know, wringing his hands. What has happened to the party of my father?
You can't attack your own party supporters, right? That's what you're getting at, right? Which is that's what the mistake Huntsman made is he attacked members of his own party. Right?
Anti-science, all this other stuff.
Hey, buddy, if you ever actually got the nomination, you need their vote.
Yeah.
So don't insult them. To defend Mr. Smith over here a little bit, I do think the establishment underreads what happened in Iowa both in 08 and 12. And I say it this way. Remember, Iowa grassroots conservatives somehow ended up with Mike Huckabee in 08 and Rick Santorum in 12. Right. Now, neither had resources to do anything after that.
Nothing.
Okay. Had this been Ted Cruz with the likely resources, or Rand Paul with the likely resources they would have to move on, then their ability to potentially march through many of the other primary states and grab this nomination. I think when you just go to the tactical aspect of this and you realize where this thing starts, if it's not a underfunded Santorum or a guy like Huckabee who suddenly after he won went to go to a paid speech, right, it didn't show that he really actually wanted to be president, and it's a guy like Cruz or it's a guy like Rand Paul who wants this, who actually seems to want this, then I don't know. The establishment waited out those guys before, right? Mitt Romney waited them out. John McCain waited it out. And to go to the Jeb issue, if Jeb wants it, I agree with you. But if he acts the way Joe's talking about, which is, you guys are, I'm tired of my party being stupid. He doesn't say the stupid party. That's a gentle line. But I'm tired of this.
Jeb can't do that.
The grassroots are going to say, hey, that's you, man.
Right.
Want this.
I would just make one point to that, which is I talked to somebody last night who's close to Jeb, who's worked with him for a long time, who honestly doesn't know if he's going to run or not. Says it's 50-50. But that if he goes all in. He goes hard. He sells those policies that are apostasy to the Republican Party with great passion in a way that...
And he should do it with passion if he does it, because it shows you a principle.
It shows you a principle, and he's not going to do it by beating up on Republicans. He's not going to do it by saying some of the stuff that Huntsman said, or wearing the hair shirt, or being very equivocal about this stuff. He's going to say, look, these are the right ideas. This is why I believe them. This is why you should believe them. But I'm also very conservative on taxes. I want to reduce taxes. I want to reduce regulation. I want to get the economy moving. I also think we need to change on immigration, rethink this on education, and sells that to people in a positive way. Whether he runs or not, who knows? But if he does, he goes hard.
Romney or Huntsman.
No.
This is a guy that was a much more conservative governor in the state of Florida. This is not Mitt Romney, who like suddenly was a conservative in 2006.